Hey everybody, welcome to Pooch and Rabold. I'm Ken Pooch Van Druten, and that is...
This is Chris Rabold. This is weird. It's like they're... Oh, it's weird.
What's
hey, you
weird?
know what though, Pooch?
What?
I got a feedback loop.
Okay, then you need to close the... Shoot. I don't know what you need to do.
The tube?
Close the...
Hang on one second.
Go to your Skype and turn the volume down on your Skype.
Go to your Skype.
Copy.
And let's see if that works.
Copy.
Or, yeah, because I don't know how you're going to turn your volume. Maybe you can turn your volume down on YouTube. One of the two you need.
Well,
to turn
YouTube's off. Hang on one second.
But you're watching YouTube because you have your chat on. That's where the loop is.
It's the chat. I'm trying to get rid of the chat.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
So you've got your stuff open, so we're
I do.
good. Do you see that, guys? Troubleshooting in real time.
Here we are.
Okay, good.
This is the first time we're trying this, guys. So we're just trying to do this. You know, we got we're going through Skype and OBS and all kinds of fun stuff to get you this. Awesome. I see you guys commenting a little bit. So Chris, I'll just throw some stuff at us so that you don't have that.
You know what
going on?
I'm going to endure the loop for 2 seconds.
You're going to endure the loop.
Only because I am going to see if I can just why don't I just turn down the volume?
Okay, see what you can do.
You know
if
what
you
I'm
can turn
saying?
down the volume on YouTube, you should be able to make this work.
Yeah, I think so. We can be grown-ups about this.
I see you guys are posting a bunch of stuff about the Earthworks. Look at that. Yeah. We were sent Earthworks microphones this last week. They're brand new, and we're digging them. We think they sound pretty good.
Yeah, on that one. So I got it. I just opened up YouTube and turned down the thing.
Okay, cool.
Look at us. We're grown-up audio
Technology. Guys. We're grown-ups here. We can make it happen. I love it.
Shout out to Kim Hilton from Earthworks.
Absolutely.
For the hookup. Kim's been a friend for many, many years. She's amazing. They're amazing. You guys know how amazing Earthworks are as a company. And they're apparently supporters of what we're doing with this endeavor and wanted us to get our hands on these. So shout out to Kim and the whole gang there.
She threw me the USB model, and you have the regular model going through an interface. So pretty cool. They're not out yet, right? Or they're coming out. I don't know what to do.
I don't think they're out. I think they're getting ready to come out.
Yeah. So check them out. They actually sound really good. Obviously, we fired them up and went, you know what? These sound great. Let's give it a shot for our live stream.
Totally.
Right on. Thanks to Kim. Boy, we got all kinds of people checking in here, and we appreciate you coming. This was kind of just a really interesting idea. I said to Chris, listen, we really are enjoying doing Pooch and Rabold, but we don't really have that interaction with people that are watching it. And we thought, well, let's try this. Let's try to do this live stream and see if we can get some people to ask us questions and talk about what they would like to talk about. So we got some people posted in here. Let's see. Kyle Gerhardt says, how do you guys handle multiple microphone company endorsements? That's an interesting question.
I got one.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't do it. Yeah, I don't.
Yes.
I love it. Like with Kim, and honestly, you know what? That's a great question, Kyle. Because to be honest with you, Kim reaches out and is like, "Hey, we've got these mics. This is cool." And I'm like, "I love Kim. I love Earthworks. I'd love to." And then my next thought is, well, my friend Roxanne, who's so incredibly awesome. I've been using the 4050, which is still sitting right here. This is how far it's made it. Because I wonder. To your point, it makes me wonder about relationships and this and that. But for me, if I'm very honest and very open, unless a band I'm working with has a deal, which I know you've got firsthand experience with that, I just am like, hey, I'd love to use your products, but I'm not going to go exclusive because I enjoy having a toolkit that's as full as it can be.
I think the quick answer to that is to be full disclosure, honest with all parties involved, right? So, I don't really have an endorsement. I don't have an endorsement with anybody, but I have relationships with all kinds of people in microphone companies, and they are very supportive, and I'm so pleased and blessed to be in that position. And, I just tell them straight up how it is. I even told Kim, I said, listen, I've been using Assure and I really like it. I think it sounds great. And I have a relationship with them. And she's like, well, just try ours and see what you think. And so that's what I'm doing. It's an open and honest relationship with stuff, but I don't really have a microphone endorsement per se. So I'm with you, Chris. It's like, I don't really accept what is that? Like people saying you're only
exclusive.
Exclusive.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
And now, speaking of though, Kim just jumped in on the chat, so she's here. Hey, Kim.
Hi, Kim.
She says they're shipping early December. And
Okay,
she
there
loves
you go.
us too. So see how that all worked out? Great.
She says they're on sale now and shipping early December. That's fantastic. Well, good. And we, Kim, we really like them. We've been checking it out this weekend. So there you go. Let's see. We got a couple more things here. Bobby Brickman says, when using LV1, and this will be a good question because you and I both use LV1, are you using your plugins to gain stage and create more level?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. Yeah. I love this question in general. We've talked about it a bunch here on the show. I am a big proponent of gain matching as best I possibly can, whether it is from a plugin in LV1, an analog insert, any literal thing that gets added to the chain, of as best I can ensuring that it not add gain, because our ears as human beings, we will instinctively and inherently pick the louder source as the better,
Absolutely.
So it what I mean? So it allows me to make A/B comparisons by not adding gain. Once in a blue moon, I will use a plugin if there's some reason where it needs to be some sort of boosting element, I will. But really, my answer to that question is a hard no.
Yes.
And in fact, I try to never add gain if I can. But if I'm honest, I've talked about it a lot here as well. I'll get to that point in a tour where everywhere there is a plugin or an insert, it adds 5 dB. So like everything is getting it, and then the ones that don't have it, there's like fader boost, and then I have to pull it all back in. So
yeah.
What about you?
Absolutely. I'm 100% with you. Same thing. I try not to do any boosting with plugins. There's an interesting discussion in preset world in making plugin presets. And I see this happen a lot where people build presets with gain built into them. And it's a thing called hype.
Totally.
And so that when you instantiate that plugin, it creates 5 dB of gain, and so it already sounds, oh my God, that plugin sounds amazing. That's
right.
That's kind of a thing that plugin manufacturers use to create good things. But I want the benefits of whatever the plugin is doing without that gain. So that's what I'm looking for, and the AB is what I'm looking for. The same thing as you. I want to be able to see what that plugin is actually doing, So.
One thing before, and it's great. I see where we're going to have a lot of interaction here, so we're not going to have a shortage of questions. One area where, I do gain match as best I can, but there are certain times where it's just not possible. In other words, and I'm with you, like you'll watch, not only will companies make presets with all this built-in hype, but if you just go on after this is over, go on any YouTube hole and you'll find all these A/B comparisons. They'll be like, check it out.
Yeah,
and they'll drop in there and it's like 20 times louder and it does sound better.
Yeah.
And what you'll find when you gain match is when you really gain match them, like, decibel to decibel, is how little the margins are that we're working in.
Totally.
And it makes you realize how much of a not huge difference sometimes things are, as much as you think they are once you put them in, start kind of fiddling with them. But like there's certain areas where if I use EQ, which of course I use tons of EQ, if I A/B EQ that has a bunch of boost with EQ that doesn't,
yeah.
I mean, and I don't make up for that when I'm listening to it. So I'm allowing myself to be tricked there to a degree.
Same way with cutting, right? If you're doing a bunch of subtractive EQ, which is mostly what we do, right? Like mostly we use subtractive EQ, but there are times when we boost. But it's the same way. If you're cutting 9 dB of sections of stuff, the AB between that's going to be huge too. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
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 Totally. Did you see a question that flew by
was
there
gonna
that you
say,
liked?
Guys, we were wondering if y'all were going to show up. Now I'm wondering if we should have had a moderator,
Well,
someone to drive this damn thing.
it's funny, Michael Lawrence texted me this morning and he's like, "Yeah, you guys should probably have a moderator." And I was
We
like,
absolutely should have had a moderator.
we'll see how this goes. So
We'll see how it goes.
It's the first time we're trying this, guys. So we'll try to get to all your questions if we can.
Yeah, and we'll have to scroll back. Here's a good one. It says there's a million good ones.
Yeah.
First of all, let me say that. This one just popped up though. It says, do you guys have a template that you build off of for new artists, or do you build from scratch? And I'm assuming he's talking about, he or she is talking about show files. So
Absolutely have a template. Man, I'm already 50% there before I show up to a new artist, in the sense of all of my busing is routed. All of my, I have EQ that's in, my presets of a starting point with, kick drum, snare drum, vocals. I'll have, plug-in chains in there, but maybe not on, but are there. That's a simple on, and say, okay, that's better, and move on. I assume you're talking about a new artist where I'm, it's a smile and dial situation.
or just like, hey, you got maybe not even a smile and dial. Like, you got a call to go work with whomever.
Right.
And you're just casually building a show file.
Yeah.
You start from a template there too,
Totally, man. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I'm that guy that brings as much as possible to the game, because that's where you really outshine others. If there's somebody there, if you show up, if you're the guy that shows up and you're dialing stuff up, and you have to say to anyone, I don't care who it is, the lighting guy, the production manager, whatever, hold on, I gotta set this all up. If you're doing that, you're failing.
Right.
Like, you need to be in a situation where all of that busing and all of that stuff is already in place. That's my opinion.
Yep.
What do you do?
Yep. It's funny because you and I talked about this, what has now been months ago. And I was talking about, I don't have, like, if I go, let's just say it's a new gig and I'm doing it, it's on a Digico. I don't have saved like Rabold start, generic session. I'm going to one of these days. I've had all the time in the world during COVID to build that, but we've talked about that, and that's one of those things. And the reason I say that is because I build the same session every single time. It's just like, and for years it's always been kind of an exercise in, new gig, build a new show file.
Yeah.
But I build the same thing every time, and it's to the point now to where I really should just start from a template. And of course, we've talked about maybe making those templates available to just some of these folks.
Yeah, sure.
So,
but I mean, my argument with that is, yeah, absolutely. I think that we should build some templates and make them available. But there's a lot of stuff that I do that, like, it just works for me, and maybe it's a little, you know what I mean?
Yes. And that's the thing, though. And what you'll find, though, is when you dig around the internet, is there's tons of stuff that people have just built. They're like, okay, if you want it, here it is. And it is specific to me. Right. Like some of my buses, like to your point, I still build in this bus. It's actually off of, how do I make it? It's off of a matrix that's always built in. And this is kind of more old school, where the lighting programmers, if they're wanting time code, they want a mono mix of music on one side to a 2 mix and time code sent to the other. Now most LDs have gotten it to where they can take multi-channels of music. They too might have their own record rig. Like, that's not as common as it used to be, but I would always show, and I do still always show up with that to a gig. And it's not only is it one less thing that I don't have to have everybody wait for me,
right.
It's one less thing to stress me out.
For sure. Yeah, if anything that I can take off of my plate that gets me focused on what it's initially sounding like, and not get my head into what's happening with the equipment. Because that's a thing now, right? Like, that didn't used to be a thing. For me, in analog land, I never really thought about what was happening with my console and with, whatever, analog gear I had on the thing. I didn't really think about it much. But now, like, literally, there's a lot of brain power being used thinking like, okay, is this really connected? And is the networking really working? And is this, I turn this knob and it doesn't sound like something's working. What's going on?
Right.
It's a different thought process, I think. And the less I can have of that, the better the result's going to be. Right.
And and it's also, there are more, we have the ability to say yes to more requests now than we ever did before, not only to these other entities that may come along and ask us for something, but to ourselves as well. Like, I now do have the ability to group every single group of guitar inputs on stage to their own bus. And guess what? Chris wants to do it. So I want to have myself. So when I build these things, my templates will often have, groups for snares 1 through 3. I might not have 3 snares, but I'm going to build it. And guitars will be built groups, 1 through 4, but I might not need it. But so yeah, and in the past we didn't have the I/O to do it.
Yep.
And then whatever processing went with it in the analog days, I literally could look over and see. Now it's like buried somewhere in the proverbial matrix.
It's a whole other thing that's going on inside our heads, that are happening. So try to eliminate that as much as possible. And also, you brought up a great point. I try to give myself every single option available to me. I think we talked about this in the past. I break out buses to where I probably won't ever care that both guitars are on 2 different buses and then eventually summed into the band bus. But having that ability to send each individual guitar to a broadcast truck or anybody that asks for it in the push of a single button makes me faster and makes me the hero when someone says, hey, I need just that guitar. Is there any way you can get me just that guitar? And that's like, there you go, dude. You got it.
Right.
So always leave yourself an out.
It keeps your session, like, I'm super anal about, I just like things in order, and of course, inevitably on a tour over time, things like the input list is no longer 1-to-1 or whatever happens. The same thing with your groups. They're no longer laid out as beautifully as you'd like them to, but as long as I can keep everything in a nice orderly manner, I'm going to do that,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Cool. There's all kinds of questions, which is great. One of the questions, Gage Baker says, Pooch, one of the last shows you mixed.
Nice name, by the way.
Yeah,
Gage
I love
Baker.
that.
I like that.
A rock star, Gage Baker.
I like that.
That's pretty awesome. He says, one of the last shows, I assume it's a he, sorry, that you mixed pre-COVID was Maren Morris at the Houston Rodeo, a tricky gig. Yes. And
that feels like 30 years ago.
If there ever was one. Yeah, that's a hard room. So the real question is, what steps do you both take to ensure success on one-offs? Do you want to take
We about 75% just covered it.
Yeah.
To be honest.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, showing up to it and you know what though? It is about, okay, for instance, what he's talking about is a gig that I did at the Houston Rodeo. They give you 20 minutes in the morning. That's all you get. Even if you're like the only artist that day or the headliner that day, you show up at 7:30 in the morning and that's all you get is 20 minutes. Well, guess what? For those 20 minutes, I wasn't thinking at all about what's going on in my mix. I was thinking about what's happening in this room and what's happening with the system.
Exactly.
So set yourself up to be prepared to only work on the system that day. Like have your mix tight, man. Spend, I get it that I get the luxury of we had one rehearsal before that show. But what that meant was, 2 rehearsals, 2 days. And what that meant is the entire rehearsal that they played, the 6 hours for the 2 days, I just was recording, was just taking in information and then spent, I don't know, you saw me, Chris, you came and visited. I spent, 18 hours, let's say, with virtual playback, just getting it happening. You know what I mean? And getting it to the point where I was like, you know what I got coming out of my console is great. When I show up at the Houston Rodeo, what I'm going to be concerned about is making that speaker system sound good. And that particular time that I showed up, I've done the Houston Rodeo a bunch of times, and a lot of times in the past it was horrible. I spent that 20 minutes just wrestling the system. But this particular last time that I went, LD System had that just sounding really amazing. So it really only took me about 10 or 15 minutes to like do my little tweaks that I needed for that. So that's me. That's how I focus on when I'm going up to one-offs. How about you, Chris?
Well, when I started to answer with, we've already done it 75% of the way, at the same time, my brain was thinking like, okay, what's that other 25%? And the answer is almost identical to yours. It's all the prep work. And then there's assuming you've got that time to work on the mix. That's almost a no-brainer. Like we don't even have to mention that. Like have the best mix you can ahead of time. But then my next thought though, as I was talking and as you were answering, was thinking of all the available EQ options I want to leave myself as it pertains to the system. And what I mean by that is, of course, I'll have a conversation with wherever I'm going and figure out how much time do I have. And like you said, that's a great example. It's a great question. It's a great example. You don't have any time there, but you knew that.
Yeah.
So I'll talk to whoever I have. Let's say we've got tons of time, right? And I'll know that I'm giving them from a feed from, say, my desk, I'm either giving them left, right, we're going to matrix it within their processor, which is what I'm going to choose to do. Or if they prefer, I'll give them left, right, fill sub. Doesn't matter. Out of my desk, it's all coming out of left, right. But I'm going to do a couple things. One, on my PA matrix left, right, I always have a graph inserted. And then for me, I know that I will also leave myself the ability to use the parametric on the matrix out for my PA feed, that too is an option. So what I'm saying is I'm thinking of, even if I have a conversation and we've got it sorted where I've got all these options, if I only have 20 minutes, I've only got 20 minutes.
That's right.
So I just want to know how tightly can I get a hold of the PA assuredly, given virtually no options. Because exactly what you said, my mix is coming in what it is. Yeah. I will adjust that quickly on the fly within the first few songs, but I probably won't adjust it much at all if I have the ability to get the PA right. So just echoing your sentiments, essentially,
Yeah, totally. I mean, so you mentioned the graph on your left and right. I would say to you, like, if you looked at some of my one-off stuff afterwards, like if I sent you the file afterwards, you'd be like, what is happening? Yeah. Like, this is the craziest stuff that's happening right now. But when you're on a one-off, it's all about combat audio, man. Like, make it happen, do whatever it takes. I kind of like all of the rules for me go out the window whenever I'm on a hard one-off. It's like, I don't care what it looks like, man. Does it sound good? Okay, cool. Later on, I might look at the file and go, wow, I wonder like what was happening. There was something.
Well, you catch your breath after the fact and you go, did I really have that much 1/6 in my mix? Yeah. Or was it the PA? You like, as you're doing it, I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you, but like I'm making mental notes, like reference this later. Cause like if I'm in the middle of a one-off and it's going well, or I remotely enjoy it, or even if it's not, if I see the gig as an asset, I'm like, okay, this could come back around.
Totally.
And I'm already planning for the future during that gig, essentially, you know? And a crazy looking graph will make you go back and wonder, was my mix just that wanky, or was the PA that screwed up? You know?
And you have to trust what's coming out of your console in those situations. You have to say, no, I know what's coming out of here. Like, put your headphones on and go,
I was going to say,
what's happening here is good. What's coming at me is not. What do I have to do to fix that?
And you know what? Okay, that's a great add-on to this question. Of course, I said, is my mix really that wanky? I'm not saying this out of arrogance. I'm saying this out of repetition. If I monitored with all my same sources while building that mix that I always do, I will know whether the mix is that weird. So aside from just the putting that show file together in the same way, I will monitor with the exact same speakers I always use, with the same headphones, with the same ear monitors, whatever. And I know you do the same thing. And that allows me to walk into those gigs with a level of assuredness that what's coming out of the desk is at least up to whatever my standard is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. Yep. You see a question there?
Yeah, I'll pick one. And I'm literally just going to pick one. Let's see. There's often tension between us and audio. Oh, this is a good one. And we've addressed this, but we'll do it. Graham Tobias says, I do live multi-track broadcasts for large shows, and often, it's totally right, Graham, there's tension between us and tour audio for a number of reasons. How do you manage these situations from your end?
That's an interesting question. I find, I mean, this is really a get along with people question, right?
It is. It is.
This isn't like, this is something that I see people do all the time. Like if I go to, one of those, I'm trying to think of the thing that's in Las Vegas. That's always a TV show. And, God, my brain is fried right now.
Just an award show.
Yeah. And pick an award show.
Yeah. Like the AMAs or something.
Let's say that. And I'll watch a new artist with a new front of house guy, like come in guns blazing.
Or new MD.
Dude, guns blazing. Do what I want you to do. This is how we do it. This is how, and not adapting at all to the situation. Man, that's a way to fail. Don't make enemies of people that are there to help you and to get along with you. And everybody involved wants it to sound good. So don't just immediately assume that, someone is your enemy. So I think if you are not playing well with the broadcast people, then you're going to end up with a shitty sounding situation, because nobody wants to do anything for anybody if you're being a jerk, right?
Yeah. In any endeavor in life.
In anything, right?
Yes.
Like if I show up to the hardware store and start blazing about how this shovel sucks, the hardware guy's going to go, well, tough
from the jump.
Tough shit, dude, Yeah.
Yeah.
Your shovel sucks. Sorry,
Right.
I mean, that's not how you show up to a record truck or to the guy that's patching or to the, any of those things. Those people are working hard, and they're working hard for you and the artist and the artist management. They are working their ass off to get you, good results. And for you to go in there with any sort of ego and start guns blazing is just not a good idea.
Yeah. I think the show I was thinking of actually was aren't the billboards usually out of Vegas?
Yes,
they were.
That's what I was thinking.
That's the
billboards,
one.
Yeah.
I had a particularly horrific experience there one year, but which is why it sticks in my mind so vividly. And what Graham's asking and what you're answering with too is it is all people related, because it's almost like the way you keep the tension. The lowest the bar should be set is I want to minimize tension. After a period of time, when you keep running into the same people over and over again, the bar gets set much and much higher, where it's like, hey, I'm going to enjoy this time with these people who are now my peers. And we're both going to get a good result, hopefully, or at least that's where you set the bar.
Yeah.
But there has to be some acknowledgement almost to the very existence of what Graham asked, that there is almost this inevitable tension built in of like, hey, I'm a dog, you're a cat, we both need to get to that bowl. Can we please drink out of the bowl together at the same time? Because we both know we want to get there. Yeah. And so in other words, when I'm planning with this person or these group of people, I know now that I have a number of things that need to be answered on my end, meaning that are my concerns. And I also already know what some of yours are, because I both acknowledge your role in this and respect your role in this. Yes. So let me give you some of those, and also let me open myself up to whatever you need, because I get it. Like, we both have a job here. There's no, pardon me, YouTube, there's no swinging dick contest here. Like, we both got to get it done.
Yeah.
Everybody has someone to answer to. So what do we do to make this, again, at the bare minimum, as least painful as possible, hopefully as enjoyable as possible? So
yeah, absolutely. I think, really the short answer to that question is it's how you get what you need from someone, because obviously you are the representative of that artist. When you're showing up to a broadcast truck or showing up to the guy that's patching, you are, the management is counting on you. The reason that you're at that Billboard Awards is to make sure that the artist is getting something. They trust you. And the people that are doing the broadcast side of that understand that that's it, right? And so there has to be this kind of, listen, I know this sucks and I know I'm asking for a lot, but you have to help me because I have this pressure of this management and this artist that is expecting this to happen, whatever, the special delay that, is going to take you 20 minutes to patch or whatever, whatever it is. And you going gun blazing in there is not going to help yourself. So,
and you will see those people again too, hopefully for yourself. If your career continue, you'll see them again. So
you'll see them all the time. Yeah. Hopefully you'll see them all the time, and those guys don't forget either, by the way. If you're the dude. No. Oh man. And how many times have you showed up to a TV show, let's say, and the guy, you get into about half a day with the guy, and then the guy starts talking about how yesterday was with such and such. And, oh man, it was horrible. And we're so glad that you guys are here today.
Right. And that's a great feeling. That's a
really great feeling. And I don't understand. What I don't understand though is how those people, from the day before, whoever it was, are still around. The thing is they'll be around for a little bit, but those guys will disappear when you act like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So cool. Great question. Let's see. There was a busing question I saw. Constellation Audio Tutorials, whoever that is.
Love it.
That's pretty awesome.
Welcome.
I'm going to have to go check out Constellation Audio Tutorials. Shout out to you. What do you choose to bus when you only have 8 to 10 busing options and cannot bus buses to buses? So I guess I assume we're talking about a lower end console, maybe a Behringer or something. What's your go-to there, Chris?
Well, I'll tell you what what really screws me up is not the number of buses, but not being able to do buses to buses.
Yes.
Only because you and I've talked about that forget Pooch and Rabold, just literally two humans talking. That throws me off big time nowadays, but I used to be able to get around it. And when that does happen, I'll just have to figure out ways to get around it. So to answer that part of the question, if that's just simply something I can't do, then I've got to get creative. Like I remember back on Profile,
I was just going to say, think about Profile days.
In the Profile, I used to make a snare group. I would send from an aux 1 would go to the snare, because that was the one snare group I had to have. So let me turn this off. That was the one group I had to have. I would send from aux 1 to a plugin. The output of that plugin would return to a channel.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes to source the reverb from that, I would take a post fader direct out send from that new channel. That's how I would make the snare group. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
And back then, and it's like now I'm like, I can't imagine how to do it. Apparently I did it just fine back then. And that was the only one I had to make. Everything else either just became a group that went to the stereo bus, or I just didn't do it. And I had good mixes and off we went. So, and as far as if I only had 8 to 10, the worst answer ever, but it depends. It would depend on how highly I would just have to choose what's the most important to me. That snare thing would be at the top of the list. If I can't group my snare, I struggle.
Right.
I struggle really, really hard. I can get away with kicks not doing it. I can get away with toms, but that snare's the big one for me. It's about the only one that I have to figure out how to make it happen.
I think it's just prioritization, right? Like you would look at that and be like, okay, so I really only have 10 stereo buses. What's important? So you look at it and be like, whatever, drums, obviously I want to do some parallel drum bus or whatever. So I'm going to have to group I'm going to have to do that. I know with the Profile, and I can't remember why I had to do this. I was just racking my brain why I had to do this, but I actually did a going out of an AES back into an AES, literally like a 6-inch jumper cable, where I went out of an AES back into an AES in order to get a group that bus together. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So I think when you are in a situation with limited gear, that's when you get to get the most creative, right? And be like, okay, I'm going to use up these 10 buses very quickly. How do I get around this? And I think that comes into hopefully planning ahead and having your template before you show up. So if someone said to me, hey, tomorrow you're going to be on an X32 and it only has, a certain amount of buses, whatever, then the template that I would build is where I would think about what that's going to look like, right? Like I wouldn't be there on the day saying, I don't know what bus I should use. I would be spending a bunch of my brain power like the night before,
Totally.
thinking about that kind of stuff. So just get creative, guys. Get creative as you can. If you're limited by your gear, that's when you get to be the most creative, I think, and make it happen any way that you can. Ultimately, I mixed 4 years from input channels to a mix bus. That's it.
Yeah.
I did that 4 years. I did it for years in clubs.
You thrived.
Yes, I did it for years in clubs. I did it for years on way lesser consoles in, little tiny clubs in, Eastern Georgia.
Right. Yeah, wherever. It didn't matter.
Where there wasn't any groups and it was what it was. It was a PV Mark 8 and you just mixed to the mix bus, and you did whatever you had to do. So it can be done and you can get a good result.
Yeah.
So cool.
Here's just a brief aside. And for some people to hear that, like us, not slumming it, but having to make decisions on a profile, like that's a good problem to have.
Yeah,
I mean, that was a cutting edge desk for a long time and it's still unbelievably usable today.
It is, isn't it? It's amazing. Like when that showed up, dude, I was like, what? Look at all this.
It changed everything for me. Just having all those plugins, that desk changed we've talked about it a ton. My actual output to the PA on that thing was from the PQ section.
Yes, mine too.
Did you do that?
I did.
Yeah, and it's because it became a logical place and you could put a graph on it.
Yeah.
I remember. I think that might have been why I ended up there.
Well, it was like wherever you could come up with buses, you were utilizing it. You were like, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to get stuff to here.
Right.
Yeah, man, it definitely changed the way that I work for sure.
Yeah. So I see something that's popped up I see so much good stuff.
I know,
But
good stuff here.
yeah, for sure. Thank you guys for giving us content for the next few months. When we sit around and go, what are we going to talk about? This one has come up a bunch. I'm not even looking at a specific question here. Or, you know what? I need to. Let me do that just so I can say what's up to somebody. Anyway, this one has a bunch of y'alls in it too, so I respect that.
Right,
but a number of people have asked this, both here and I've noticed in some of our comments or whatever. Charles Ryan is the most recent, and he says, "Do y'all mix inputs or buses in y'all's control groups?" And I see that come up as a question a lot, and I want to be clear to answer this that there is no hard and fast rule. The only rule is for me, what's the last step in the chain to it getting out of the desk. So in other words, so what we were just talking about, let's say I have one guitar player, but he has 2 mics and I bus them to that guitar 1 group. Well, then guitar 1 gets assigned to the guitar, his respective VCA or DCA. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I want to make this clear too. I often keep all of my DCAs. It's so hard for me to say DCA, but all of my DCAs are in the center section on most consoles. And the lead vocal will sit the first input to the right of those. So there's like this much literal space between them. I will still assign this lead vocal like everything goes to the DCAs. For me, it just creates a work area.
Yeah. 12 faders in front of you or 8 faders in front of you that are like, these are my go-to. The outside are like what I go to if I need to, work on something individually, but like this is where I'm mixing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yes, totally. That's like my world of mix, even if it seems redundant to make one of those, a DCA or a VCA or whatever. But in the example I was giving, whether that same guitar player, let's say he has one rig that has two guitars mics on it. It gets summed to a group. It goes to his DCA. If he then has another amp off to the side that just has one input on it, well, clearly I'm not grouping that. I'm leaving that input, but that input then goes to it. So that's my answer, and that's what's important is it doesn't matter whether it's an input or a group or a stem or a bus or a matrix. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's whatever's the last piece in the puzzle.
I think
right?
that this question also opens up a can of worms, which is the mix into compression or not.
Oh, this is a huge one to keep in mind.
Yeah. So
that's not a small, oh, by the way.
No.
Right.
So this is to me, that's what this question is asking, right? Like, do you take your control groups and you control inputs, which are now you're controlling inputs that are mixing into bus compression.
That's a whole other train of thought.
Right.
Right.
Or
right.
do your control groups control the outputs, which are post that bus compression?
And give them an answer for you. What is your, because I have a feeling we agree on this. What's your train of thought?
Most of the time, I am not mixing into compression. I am using control groups to control outputs of stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the compressor remains the same. What's mixing into that compressor, the threshold is set for that and is reacting to what's happening in your mix. So most of the time, I don't mix into compression, maybe besides the mix bus, because the mix bus, you are mixing into compression no matter what you do.
Yep.
But outside of that, I can't think of a real time that I do that, except for maybe when I'm using limiting to just take the peaks off of something in a bus. Then I might be having a control group control the input side of that, but not very often.
You're talking like, I can't even tell by the way you're shaking. You're talking like 0.2% of the time with that. And I think that's maybe why they're asking so much. Like they're still asking. Do your DCAs just control the groups? No, that's not the point. The point is what's the last piece of the puzzle before it leaves.
Yes.
And what you're saying is so hugely important. Like if I left in my example with those two guitar inputs that then went to a bus, explain this to them.
Yeah.
That bus, it has processing on it. If I've left my DCA only controlling these, well, now I'm like, let's say these sitting at Unity have 2 dB of compression. Well, I throw up the DCA 6 dB. Now
your compressor does 6 dB.
Yeah, it doesn't.
You're fighting yourself, right?
Yep.
So DCA, as far as, the part that you're mixing. See, I think the thought process is that you and I both have, which is those 12 faders right in front of us. This is where I mix from. This is,
yes.
I'm not really doing a whole, besides like snapshot stuff. There is some input stuff that's doing snapshot information, but this is where I'm mixing from. These 12 faders is where I do stuff. I don't want to be able to, push a fader and have it, mix into a compressor. I want that to be post all of that so that when I push up a guitar solo, it still has that nice bus compression, but I'm actually raising the volume of that bus,
the output.
So it's something really to think about. I think guys don't get that through their head and don't understand what the difference is. And you guys should experiment with that if you don't. Like if you don't know what the difference is of mixing into compression versus mixing the actual group output side of that, you should experiment with that, right?
Yeah, and maybe 100%. And maybe a good way to wrap it up too. Don't get too caught up in what is an input and what is a group. The reason that we are either summing these things or not is to create a sound.
Yes.
Think of it as the sound, not as whether it's an input or a group. Maybe that'll make it a little less. Just don't get too caught up in the words. Yeah.
But I think it's a great question because I get asked that a lot. Like people say, do you mix into compression or not? And the short answer is not often. I spend meticulous hours getting compression and whatever processor that I'm using on that bus to be hit just the right way to come up with the right output and the right sound. Why would I want to screw that up by sending more information from an input to an output, right?
And in fact, someone is just saying they were talking about with a good example of this would be drum inputs. and they're talking about making VCAs for drum inputs and then one for the output. Don't do all that. You don't need to do all
That's
that.
right.
Make it for just the outputs. Make it like, for me, my drum VCA, DCA, whatever the hell it is now.
Control group.
Right, control. It's comprised of my drum group. Drum for
group
me, I call it drum
and
tape.
then parallel compression, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
Whether you
three
have-
for you, it's 3 stereo buses, right?
Yeah, and whether it's 1 or 70,
Yeah.
it's all of the. And then the reason is that now that drum, because I've established that blend.
Yes.
I've established that compression that's tucked up underneath it and all of it. If for the song I need to pull the drums down a little, or literally just for my own reference, I haven't now changed the relationship of all the drums.
And
and
you
all
haven't
that
changed.
creative-
You haven't changed the relationship in the parallel compression bus part of that either.
That's
That's important to realize.
That's it. Because if you take that drum DCA and you now pull it down 8 dB, your parallel bus that was like slamming and getting gnarly and crunchy is now just sitting there.
It's
just
now
going,
8 dB hotter. Like that relationship, is
it's not doing anything.
That's right.
So yeah. So just again, think of it as a sound. What's the final sound? That might be the best way to do it.
Yeah, totally.
All right. What else we got here?
Jacob Lewis says, "Hey guys, I'm curious, in a live environment, how much dynamic range do you allow to pass through your mastering stage?" Great question.
That is a great question. I have found.
How big do you squash, Chris?
Right. Now I have found we've talked often about how we do things. Again, we're talking about it right now in stages. We're talking about these groups or these different varying levels of building blocks that we place, that we build very specifically. I have found my mixes at the beginning, before I have any limiting dynamics, anything has gone on. At the very beginning, it always starts out where there's like, the drums are way hotter. If I'm looking at peak level, the drums are like 10 dB hotter than everything else. And then once I gain control of it, and really quit being Mr. Drum Guy Mixer and really get it balanced, there's already not a ton in there. Like, it's just the way that I cook, the way that I put it all together, it's kind of pre-bricked by the time it makes it to that section at the end. And therefore, what I personally usually ending up with, there's no gain reduction on any of the saturation that I do on the stereo bus. If I do some, but I know it's there, probably 2 or 3. I'm just guessing on average, but like my bus compressor is usually just from a 0.5 dB. And again, this all depends on the speed of that VU meter or the emulation of the V. Like, there's a lot at stake here. It's not just as simple as, oh, I'm doing 1 dB. Well, you might really be doing 5, but the meter shows you 1. So on those type things, it's usually 0.5 to 3 at the most. Now, where I have gotten into some different stuff lately, and I've mentioned it in our talks, is I have started to embrace more hardcore digital limiting on the actual stereo bus itself. Those super fast, instantaneous, like literally instantaneous peaks. I now am not as afraid to shave 1 to 4 off of there, because I found it doesn't have the same feedback ramifications, because it's so fast, that constant 4 dB of compression does. So for me, I guess what I'm saying for my answer is it's already pretty squashed by the time I get real with myself.
Yep.
By the time I get it to a usable place, and then I'm applying varying stages of 0.5 to 3-ish, all around.
It's a complicated answer, because
even that answer is kind of bullshit. I gave you like 3 answers.
No. I think your answer is totally valid. What I'm saying is that the answer from both you and me is going to be complicated, because we are not there's no compression and then all of a sudden we're mastering the mix bus.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening. Like, what's happening is gain staging of compression as we go. So there's compression that happens on my drum bus and my parallel drum bus. There's some compression that happens in the bass bus. There's some compression happens in guitar bus, compression in playback, and all of those things are independent compressing, certain amounts, and some are really hardcore compression, and some are just little tickly bits, but kind of reining everything in. So we're mastering along the way. So this question to me is always like, well, by the time you get to my mix bus or to the record bus, there's not a whole lot of compression going on because I'm already have been doing it in the bus to the bus to the bus thing. And so it's a culmination of a lot of different things. So the short answer is on my mix bus is like tickling. I mean, I'll use a C6, on a mix bus just to kind of rein in some things where, if I'm really pushing into my mix and I want it to kind of, level things out where it doesn't get too smiley EQ-ish, you know what I mean? Like I want it to kind of, when I'm really pushing into it, that'll, I'll get into, 3 dB of compression. Right. At the most, but literally like just sitting there in a normal song during a chorus, it's just tickling. And the reason is because before that, my parallel drum bus is doing 20 dB of compression, right? And the drum bus itself is doing 4 dB of compression, so it's the method of how you get there. But I would say if you were in a situation where we just talked about with a lesser console and you were mixing to, and your only choice was to mix to you only had 2 buses or whatever, I would probably end up doing a little more mastering than I would in the situation that I just talked about. Wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yes. And I think people, and I do too, guys, don't have these same questions from some of my favorite mixers, whether they're peers or people from 30 years ago or people that are doing it now. I mean, I'm always curious what people are doing. I think we always are looking for, how much do I do on my stereo bus? 17 on average. Like we're looking for that magic. That's where the magic is what is the tonal implications of the work that I'm doing.
Right.
And often that comes from 2 things. One, the circuitry involved in that, whatever that unit might be, whether it's an emulation or a hardware version. And 2, the attack and release times.
Right.
Which in turn lends itself to distortion. It's like what are the varying levels of tonality and distortion that are brought forth from the processing that I'm doing. So I would say, and keep in mind that we're talking about needles tickling, but it's like, but what's on which one and what's the attack and release? That's the bigger one. Get to learn your attack and release times and what you're really going for with those.
Yeah.
Totally. So, yeah.
Great question. You see one you want to throw at us? There's one specific to you. Super Duper Sounds. I love that. Says, Chris, you sum your snare top and snare bottom into a group before applying your gate. How do you manage that, and how much depth or reduction do you usually do on your snare drum? It's not true. He's asking me, I think.
Right.
Because I'm the one that uses a gate on a group.
Right.
But
although I have done it recently because it was the move in a really fast situation. But go ahead.
No. Yeah. I mean, so the real question is, all right, I'll answer it. So for me, I treat a group as if it were an input. A group of the snare drum is a top and a bottom. It's an all combined one single sound. And so the settings of that gate are no different than I would for kind of a regular, let's just say a snare top, although I will say that probably the release time and the hold time is a little bit longer than you would on if you were doing individual gating, in order to get that snary sound, the after stuff. I don't in general anyway, do super tight gating on anything anyway. I like drums to have, some amount of depth to them and ring out after they get smacked. So my hold times and my release times are longer, I think, than most people's. I want a gate to open. I want to sit there while the actual sound of the drum envelops, and then I want it to slowly, go away. What I listen for is other drums showing up in the release of whatever that gate time is. So if you are noticing, if you're soloing up a snare drum, for example, and you're noticing that there's a lot of kick drum going on in that snare drum because the release time is long, that's when I make it shorter. So that's my quick answer to that.
Yep. And my philosophy on gating is similar, if not spot on. But yeah, he's right. You're right. You guys are both right, obviously. You usually do it at the group.
I do.
I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it on the individual sources.
I find for me, yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. I just find for whatever reason, it's just me. I don't like release times to be different of two different inputs of the same thing. Do you know what I mean?
I get it. I do.
So like, it sounds weird to me to put two gates, one on the snare top, one on the snare bottom, and have a longer release time of the snare bottom than the snare top. To me, I hear that, and it makes me, it just makes it weird for me. Like to me, it should be, even though I'm using two microphones, it's one instrument. You know what I mean? It's the snare drum. So that, and it's just the way that my thought process is.
And to give an opposing viewpoint, I think for me, like I'll do, if it's guitar inputs and they're gated, and I will gate guitar inputs. Like if it's a noisy, if the noise floor of the amp, it's a high gain amp, it just sits there going, I'll have this gate that's always in it, like, and I'm sure you do it too.
I do soft gating all the time. Yeah.
I'll set it between songs.
Yes.
While everyone's standing around. And I mean, that gate is at like negative 52.
Totally. Are you kidding, dude? I work for a legacy rock band. Every single input that's coming out of that stuff is sitting there going,
yeah, totally.
It is.
Totally. So I'll do that. So, and those will all be set to, like, I'll find it on one channel, copy and paste it to the others. So they're all, but with drums, for example, of course, you go back to the snare. My just to give an opposing answer, my thought process is on the top, if it's gated, I'll say 80% of the time the snare top is gated. If it's gated, I make a decision, like you said, on how long it opens, depending on a number of factors: tone, bleed, hi-hat spill, right? But I usually want it to be as long so it's natural sounding, but I want it as short so that it's doing something specific. I also, if it's just a really difficult input, if I'm trying to reduce ring or some nasty overtone, I'll make it even shorter. The bottom, the one thing that I do really, really like is I like the sound. Now my snare bottom is usually at like, negative way down there, but it's in there. And I don't like snares to be cut off too soon. So and because it's like an additive and not really, that's my thought process, is I want those things to ring out longer. So that's the difference. But
I totally get what you're saying.
I know you do. I'm explaining it for the
no.
I know.
I'm just saying that we get the same result, but there's two different ways to get it. There's not two. There's 100 ways to get something that you think is great. There is no wrong answers to any of this shit. Listen, if you guys mix into compression and it works for you, then congratulations.
and even, you were talking about that. We were talking about mixing into bus compression. Yeah. That's the same argument for guys that are into like pulling up plugin presets. Guys, look at the difference between people that put their EQ before compression and EQ after compression. If it's a channel strip type thing, like that's a whole other, that would be a good topic for you and I to get into at one point in time. Like some people are big believers on boosting into compression.
Yeah.
And some people are just, myself included, are really, really big into doing the opposite.
Totally.
Whatever works. Whatever works.
Whatever works. It's funny. We talk about this all the time offline. Chris and I do, about how, we share the way that we do things, and we're literally just giving it to you guys. Like, here, this is what we do, but it doesn't mean that it's right. Or it doesn't mean that it'll work for you. It just means that it's something that we've developed over the years that works for us. And hey, give it a try. And if it works for you, then great.
Yep.
Cool.
Let's field a few more.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's an interesting question. If you show up to a festival with your ST7, what do you tend to give the PA guys, your left and right, and do you give them Dante, Matty, AES, analog? What's your thing?
First of all, let me say this. I still, even when I have
that was Ben Welch, by the way. Ben Welch.
Okay. What's up,
Shout
Ben
out
Welch?
to Ben Welch.
Author Ben Welch, actor from golden era of cinema.
Yeah.
Ben Welch. I'll say this. Let me answer this real quick because I just had to go. I just did a one-off. There is still this part of me that's like, please take analog. And the only reason I say that, I know the sonic superiority of digital, and I want it to be that. And I know everyone's aware of what needs to clock to what. There is still this part of me that's like, God, to just not have to worry about a clocking issue.
I'm
and I used to be the other.
This.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And we're showing our age here.
Yeah.
There's another part of me that used to be the exact opposite. I was like, no matter what, we're going digital. You're going to take it. I have all these super smart people that work with me, including the dude that I'm talking to. Everyone's going to be on the same page. It'll be included in a round of emails of all this preparation shit that we're talking. But the last thing in the world I want is some clicks and pops. You know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping they're cool with analog. I know there is benefit in digital. So as far as the interface type, let me just say that's just me calling myself out,
100%.
you know? And it's not like it's a mystery. It's not like everyone's going, what do we do with these AAS lines? How do we clock this? Everyone knows. I know the answer.
Yes.
It's just that, like, minimizing damage. As far as what I give them, that will be discussed ahead of time. I can tell you, even if I have to give them 40 lines of inputs, unless their system is just crazy, if they need left, right, sub, and fill, for example, those are derived from matrices in my desk that are all just summing
left and right
yep. together.
Yep.
Because I don't have a different front fill mix. I don't have a different sub mix. So whatever it looks like, it's all the same thing,
yep.
basically, you know?
So that's exactly what I do. And that's exactly true. All of my matrix outputs that are going anywhere are derived from my left and right. But the reason that I hand a festival person left, right, sub, front fill is because I want an emergency handle for any of those things.
In that too. I didn't say that, but yes, of course.
So, I ask for those things only that I can have some way if, my singer's standing right in front of a front fill
yep.
and it's taking off. I can't, there's too much time for me to turn around to the PA guy
yep.
and say, dude, turn down the
yep.
front fill, whatever. It's me.
What aren't you getting? Turn them down.
Yeah. It's me
right.
grabbing a small fader in front of me, that has
right.
whatever, that has the front fill on it. So that's why I give that out. But what is sourced from those is left and right. You know what I mean? So it's not like I could just give them left and right. And that is what I want them to source my sub into, and I want them to source the front of, the front fill. But if I do it, then I have an emergency handle afterwards. Now,
yep.
as far as analog versus digital, 100%, I still give analog. And
we've never talked about this, so this is as enlightening to me as it is everyone else.
I know.
That's good to hear you say.
I walk up to guys and I can just see it in their face when I say, nope, I want to hand you analog. I see them go.
The relief, because they feel the same way.
Yeah.
They do.
And the reason is keeping your board group clocked and working. That clock works. It's all,
yes.
I have a bunch of digital things all clocking together, and to get all those things to clock together is kind of a feat.
Yep.
To make sure that
even when it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Even to any of you that are sitting there now going, oh, but no, what you don't understand. No, we do understand. Yeah. We've just experienced it go wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if I can keep myself almost like a firewall. I'm
yep,
creating a
totally.
firewall between me and them and saying, okay, there's no way that there's going to be any clocking issues between us because I'm going to break that, make a firewall. It's analog to you. The other thing is that I kind of actually like the sound of the Lake, digital to analog conversion. I like the sound that it has versus handing them digital and wherever their conversion is happening. Maybe it's all the way at the speaker. there's a sound that happens coming out of my Lake processors that I actually kind of think sounds good. That converter sounds good. So that is now part of the sound that I've handed them, is the output analog side of my Lake converter. It adds to what my output is. So that's the answer to that shit.
Yep. And it's a sound that, even if your answer wasn't, I like that sound, it's a familiar sound.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's part of that too, is just more familiarity.
Yeah.
But
let's just get the other side of that. What about your touring rig? So are you digital, like all the way to the speakers?
Oh yeah. Now, if it's my touring rig, again,
okay,
it's
that's
because
a
I know
whole
where
other
all
thing.
the bodies.
Yeah,
it's a whole other thing. So if you hear what we're saying, guys, don't think we're two dinosaurs sitting here going, gotta be analog. No, I'm just minimizing damage. If it's my own rig, it's going to be whatever the most vetted and thing I have most confidence in, leading edge technology getting me there.
Yeah.
But we will have all the time in the world to make sure that it's right, that clocking is right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I 100% know the benefits of, and will attest to the benefits of going digital. So when it's on my own watch and my own team's watch, absolutely are we going digital via whatever that looks like, Dante or AES. I don't give a shit as long as it is superior.
Yeah, totally.
I
know, both of us use Claire a lot, and their whole Dante world is great. I mean, it's like, all kinds of ways to patch stuff to different places, and it sounds really great all the way. The speakers are the last place that converts. So it works very good. You got another one?
Not at the moment, because you got me thinking about something.
Because I got you thinking about stuff.
Yeah. Whatever.
There's my dogs barking and stuff.
Nice.
That's what happens in a live stream.
Live and in the moment. I don't know. Cruise around with me. What do we say? Well, here's one. This is just a thing. We've talked about this. I said here's one, and then I just lost it. How about choir backing vocals on stage? Do you just leave them on, or maybe use tricks like the Optigate? And then a nice compliment after that. Thank you, Matthias Thunbo. I will, to answer that question quickly, if I have the options available to me, I will do any and everything possible to, I'm going to say gate. It's not quite gating. It's not quite expanding. I will do anything that I have at my disposal to quiet them between usage. Whether that's the Neve 5045s, whether it's some onboard version of that. It's funny, the Optigates, I only have one gig that I use the Optigates on, and it's only because they are holdovers within that camp from a bygone era. The Optigates come, if you think about it, they're way ahead of their time when they came out, but they come right, but they come ripe with a lot of problems of their own.
Yeah, they do.
The sensitivity, their physical pieces in line, lighting, hitting them, there's all these things. So there's only one gig where I use the Optigates, and it's only because I didn't spec it. It was just like part of the world when I got there, and then kind of not to my chagrin, but I was happily like, oh, they do kind of work okay still. So I've just left them in place. But I will, like, when we talk about it all the time, I'll do everything I can to minimize any mic, any vocal mic particularly that's on stage at any given time. And you talk about the ultimate A/B comparison, listen to your mix with and without all that engaged.
Yes.
So if I know I can't, or if I just kind of give into it, then I've got to it's another element you have to mix into. Like, you have to mix into that element of that now super hot open source on at all times. Choir is like a whole other thing. If you've got a choir, which I've only had sparsely throughout my career, man, that is like,
it's tough.
It's tough, and where they are and how much, and you just have to accept it, because choirs, which are oftentimes sort of spot mic'd, there's not a lot of gating or expanding or anything you can do that will use them, because there's not the transient response needed from a faraway microphone to open those things. So choir and backing is different, but that's sort of my answer to that one. What about you?
Anything that is a hot input, which is usually vocals, is something that I am dynamically mixing all the time. So no background vocals are ever just sitting there. Most of the time, background vocals for me are on a handle that's right next to a lead vocal, and I know when background vocals happen, and I'm throwing them in only for the line and pulling them back out. It is a dynamic mix that happens all the time. I never leave stuff there. If you can get away with that. Now I know you guys, there's some situations you guys do churches or whatever, and people walk up to background vocals all the time and you can't keep your eye on what's happening, and it's never the same. I'm talking about a situation if you're touring and you know, the background vocals are the same every time. I learn them and I mix them dynamically. That's my answer for background vocals. If I were to leave them at 0, it would completely destroy my mix all the time.
Yep.
So it's just something, you know, I've been in situations where I've had to leave them in a little bit, but they're still, you know, down like 12 dB. And then if someone walks up, you know, I'll grab them, you know, as they walk up to the thing. I do that a lot, but there's never muting of those. It's always fader dynamic stuff. So, okay, they need to be a little bit hotter, okay, and pull them back down. And sometimes I'll leave them at like, you know, -12 or whatever. So that's my answer about backgrounds. Choral stuff is tough. I did a whole tour that was, you know, a different choral group every day, which made it even harder because you never knew what you were going to end up with. But shout out to Roxanne at AT and also Gary Boss. They recommended a microphone, the 4031. I want to say it's a little pencil condenser.
I know that one. That's a good mic.
For choral stuff, I got to tell you, it's amazing. And I had like 6 of them for, I don't know, 40-piece chorus. It was a Christmas tour with Michael McDonald. And so there was a 40-piece chorus every day singing Christmas stuff, along with a loud rock band that was on the stage. So,
hey, real quick.
That was tough. Hey, it's Toby Francis.
Shout out to Toby Francis.
I guess he doesn't watch our thing because he would know that
he doesn't know we're busy. Yeah.
Well, that's funny.
Or maybe he does.
Tell him I said hello. Maybe he's calling his question in. Maybe. How about that?
Yeah.
Anyway,
so
shout out. That was really the only way that I survived that, and that is, man. I mean, you got to leave it up in there, but I'm still dynamically mixing that anyway. I had all 6 of those microphones on a handle and was doing like -6 dB when they weren't singing, and then, you know, +6 when they were, and just getting them, you know, dynamically mixing. You don't just leave stuff in your mix. That's why they call it mixing.
Exactly.
Get your fingers in there. You know, snapshots are cool, but if you want your shit to sound good, then mix. Use your fingers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about on the tours I have where, you know, it's a tour. So I do have, it's a background vocal that does has something on it. PSE 5045, one of the noise reducing elements, blah, 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 blah. They are both have that, and they're subject to snapshot, which is what you're saying, which I do incorporate mutes. If I know somebody's just not singing, like I will mute that one on that one.
That's part of the snapshot. Like if there's no background vocals in that whole song, then that's part of the snapshot for sure.
Right. Yeah. And they're on a DCA or VCA or control group. It's like there's these varying levels.
Yeah.
Like you should be good with just one, but I guess what we're saying is we're constantly ensuring that nothing's creeping through those sources.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Totally. So, you know, we both thought that we were just going to do this for an hour, but holy crap, there's all kinds of questions. Maybe let's just take one more question. And then guys, we're going to go back and look at this stream and try to grab some of these questions off, and use them for, future stuff. And if you love, this live stream thing, I think it was pretty successful, and I'm glad you guys all came. Maybe we can make it kind of a regular thing. Do you have one question in there, Chris, that you see that is something that really drew you?
First of all, I love the fact that Josh Hovelman is making light of the subs on an ox question. I appreciate the humor there. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Well, this one could go. We could go on for this one for a minute, and we've talked a lot about it, but let's just do it. It's just one of the most recent ones. I don't know. The username is Davis. I believe that's Davis CT. Could you speak to your interpersonal strategies for working to improve less than optimal sounds at the source, particularly not on tour or early on when relationships, that's a good add-on, or particularly early on when the relationships haven't been developed yet? So that's kind of a big question.
That is a big
Basically,
question.
how do you deal with less than great inputs? Let's just make that the question. How do you walk into a new gig, you immediately recognize on day one, this is my shit source. I know. It's such a big question that it's almost like, there's so many answers to this. How do you deal with that?
To me, this is a people skills question too. This is judging how receptive the people are going to be to you showing up and telling them their shit sucks.
Right. On day one.
Right? Because that's the real deal.
Week one, month one, year one. What's my window of even broaching the topic?
How far can I push this before I get pushed back or I mean, you can get yourself in real trouble with this, right? Like if you come in guns blazing and start telling people, hey, dude, your guitar tone sucks. Then you don't know that maybe that guitar player is the, nephew of the, of the pop artist, and boom, you're done, So you can't, it's all about how you approach the subject. And what I often do is use hey, in the greater good, in the better part of this, not just focusing on you. Let's think about the entire thing and this entire mix, which is what my job is. My job is to make this whole thing sound good. Your particular sound on that one song is just whatever, too bright, too dark, too whatever, in relation to the rest of all of the stuff that I have. Do you get it? So I'm saying that to him in a way, him or her in a way that is not super threatening, because what I'm saying is, oh no, it's a great sound. That's not really what I mean. It's a shitty sound. But what I'm saying to that person is, it's a great sound, but it just doesn't work in the overall picture, which is what I'm thinking about. I know you're not thinking about that. You're not thinking about the big picture. I am. And in the big picture, that sound doesn't work. And I find that works a lot, showing up and having, but it's those kind of communication skills. Those are the hardest things to tell somebody how to have that. Because that can go fastly wrong, super quick on you. I've been in situations where I've said something like that and just watched someone's face and just go, oh shit, here we go. This is not going to go well, I have backpedaled out of, if someone pushes back on me hard, then I backpedaled out of stuff and been like, okay. And then you have to approach it from a different angle. Worth it. What's that? Mm-hmm.
I was saying, cause big picture, it's not worth it.
No, that's right. I've gotten to that situation and then gone another direction with it. Like, gone to the musical director and have that same conversation, but you have to be careful with that because then that guitar player sees you as going behind their back.
Totally.
Totally. So those are all like communication skills and psychology that have nothing to do with making something sound good. And ultimately, I will tell you, I only push so far before I go, all right, you know what? It is what it is, and I'm going to have to deal with it. Right?
Right.
And I've only been in, I don't know, one or two situations where everything coming at me sounds like shit. And if that's happening, then there's not a whole lot you can do, right?
Yeah. There's some reckoning to be done with the gig as a whole.
Yes.
do I even need to be there?
Like if you can get to a place where like the drums sound great, but maybe the bass and the guitar coming at you is not great, then at least the drums sound great, right? And that's something you don't have to think about anymore. It's, concentrate on how to make the bass and the guitar sound good. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer. What's your answer to it?
In fact, even when I asked it, this is not a multi-hour conversation. This is like a multi-year, never-ending conversation.
Yes.
I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
And there is no right or wrong answer. So you didn't, in fact, you gave the most concise answer you possibly could on something extremely complex.
Yes.
You know, I will say this. I did something recently with our friends from MXU, and it will become content eventually. And the content is so vast that I'm not kind of spoiling anything by saying something that came up in conversation was we were talking about COVID, and we're talking about the challenges it's presented for these people that are doing a lot of live streams now. And I was saying, well, you know what it may have also, what I'm hearing in people talking about these challenges is opportunity. And what I meant by that was, you know, there's oftentimes where we enter a gig, and a gig oftentimes is a relationship, unless it is just a one-off. It's like, man, I'm here for a while. And that while might only be a week, or it might be indefinite, hopefully years. And that's when it comes into what's the best way to handle this on a relational level. And there might be something that you've been wanting to talk about forever. It's driven you crazy from the second you noticed it. But because of interpersonal dynamics, it just wasn't the right time. It hasn't been the right move to do it. And what we're seeing now with COVID, and a lot of these people that are dealing with live streams is, you know, artists are now, people are sort of being forced into deal with these things. Artists being like, hey, you know, I'm listening back, or artists or performers, you know, not even artists. And they're like, and I'm noticing that X, Y, and Z. So your back's against the wall. You have to answer. And for a lot of people, that's now become the opportunity where, like, okay, you know what? I've been wanting to talk to them about their shitty mic technique for years, or that they're flat,
so great,
or their tone, yes, or whatever it might be. And that's when you then now have the ability to go, you know what? I hear you on that one. In fact, you know what? This is how we can work on it. And boom, that's your in.
That's great.
You know?
Yeah. But
I think the important thing to note is that we are making an assessment of these things on a number of levels. Like, what's that shitty input? What is its threat to the overall mix? And then comes the litany of other things. Who's it coming from? What's the ramifications of talking to them? And don't get us wrong, some people might be really open, and the win of this situation might be you coming to them with calm confidence that they've never been approached with before. And maybe they too have been struggling or wishing someone would tell them, would work with them, not tell them what to do, but would work with them. So we're assessing this early on and very aware of it, because you know how it is. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You can't not notice. You know what I mean? But it's just like, at what point in time do I address it? The worst is when you're sort of forced to address it from an outside source, you know, whether the MD or the artist or someone wants to know either what that sound is or why is the mix cluttered there, and you sort of have to, as delicately as possible, basically go, because of this, watch, mute, it all cleans up.
Right.
You know? So it's tough, man. It's super, it's way easier to have an ideal world where you know exactly how to clean up an input and that just magically happens, than to have it and then all the other hurdles that come in front of it that are strictly interpersonal. How do you navigate those going forward? But I can tell you this, there are very few mix strategies that will overcome whatever that problem is.
Totally.
You know,
totally. That's that's it. That sums it up right there. It's all about people skills, man, and how you handle yourself and how you carry yourself. You know, remember, I always talk about this. It's like you have to appear to someone that they are getting what they need out of you. That's how you have to appear to them, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can figure out how to do that, you know, the rest of it's easy. It really is. Yep. So. Guys, thank you so much for coming to the first stream. We're really super stoked that you all showed up, and boy, it went quick. And you know, we were thinking that nobody was going to be here, and we were just going to be singing, you know, sitting here talking to ourselves. But it's great that you all showed up. And if you like this, you know, comment and tell us on all of our stuff on our channel. Make sure you tell your friends, subscribe, and like. And if you like the whole live stream thing and the interaction of that, we'll try to do more of this. We thought it was a pretty good idea. So cool. All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon on Pooch and Rabold. Take care, guys.
See everybody. Pooch, I'll call you later. All right.